When we talk about climate change, the first thing we talk about is CO2 concentration. Sure, a major share of Earth's atmosphere is basically nitrogen and then oxygen, and then there's other gases. But we have to understand that carbon dioxide concentration, as much as it has become a villain these days, amongst other greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide is the main reason why life is possible on Earth. Since the advent of industrial revolution, we have been digging and using more and more fossil fuel energies, which have, on one hand, made possible all the technologies that we take comfort from these days, but they are also, on the other hand, are the main culprits of global warming and climate change. Now, what the greenhouse gases do, and CO2 is one of the major greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere, apart from other greenhouse gases like methane, oxides of sulfur, carbon, trace gases, etc. What do? They trap a certain amount of solar heat in the Earth's atmosphere without reflecting everything back. If we do not have these greenhouse gases, a major portion of sun's light will be reflected back into the space, which will make it impossible to actually have a planet which is warm enough for life to sustain. Now, what happened, as we saw in the previous graph, post-industrial revolution, we are pumping more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is getting trapped into our atmosphere because it's basically a bubble that we live in. And this bubble is getting hotter and hotter. This phenomenon is called global warming. And the impact of such a warming planet in space and time is what we call as climate change. So this is the fundamental of what global warming and climate change is. Just with this very brief background is that there is an increased CO2 concentration, which is predominantly, and we have enough scientific evidence which actually says this increase in CO2 and greenhouse gas concentration in the Earth's atmosphere is directly correlated with the burning of fossil fuels. And this is what we call as anthropogenic emissions. And if this continues at the current rate, we will be living in a planet which is unbearable or human beings are not adapted to. When I say life becomes unbearable, what does it mean? Climate change is something that people are experiencing already today in the form of a slow spreading cancer. You don't know until you reach a critical level that you do have cancer. And this is how we see climate change impacts. Of course, the media and these things, they kind of exaggerate things sometimes, and although they are based on science, but what one needs to understand is the impacts of climate change are not uniformly spread across space and time. The global south, which people argue and which is also true, which is not so responsible for the current situation of global warming and climate change, unfortunately will experience more and more exacerbated impacts of climate change in terms of sea level rise, floods and droughts, biodiversity, agriculture yields, leading to climate refugees, etc., etc. Now, there is even enough scientific evidence that climate change is triggering wars these days because of the political instability, let's say, for example, the biodiversity loss or agricultural loss in agricultural yields will lead to. So the idea here is we know that we are emitting anthropogenic activities are leading to increase in greenhouse gas concentrations in our atmosphere. If we don't do anything, this would be a biggest threat to humanity, which already is, by the way. And the causality is very well established. The cause and effect. The cause is increased greenhouse gas emissions. The effect is the decrease in yields, flooding and drought, and increased forest fires, etc., etc. And it's not exaggeration to actually say that climate change as a phenomenon threatens our very own existence on this planet. And when we say we need to save Earth, what we actually mean is we are too scared to leave Earth as we know, where it becomes unbearable to live on this planet. So now that we know that we need greenhouse gases, but not to an extent and in a concentration that we currently have, and we need to reduce it, we need to tackle the root cause. And the root cause is the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, and the whole idea of decarbonization is to reduce the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere moving on.